6:30, we'll call the Monday, March 27th City Council for the City of Mayor to order. If you please start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any additions to the agenda tonight?
I have no additions to the agenda, Mayor.
Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. That will take us to public comments. If there's anyone who would like to discuss anything that is not on the agenda tonight, please come forward. If you would please state your name and address for the record.
Jessica McGowan, 1214 Hidden Creek Boulevard. I was here about 2 years ago, and when we were discussing the ponds and the developments, and then they did the assessment. I know I talked to the guy who's outside doing the assessment for our pond. I was just curious too what the plan is for going forward. I know last summer, some days my kids would run in because they couldn't play in the backyard anymore because it smells like rotten eggs, and it's disgusting. I mean, to look at our whole pond is green most of the time. We always joke if we were to sell our house, we'd have to sell in the winter because nobody would buy it in the summer. I know there's talk of maybe dredging the ponds, or I think the aeration probably wasn't the best option, the aerators that were discussed. Just curious what the plans are for addressing these.
Policy now in place for our ponds, and we don't have Public Works here tonight to talk through it a little bit more. And yes, they're going to start assessing each pond and going through them. We've kind of got them all ranked. Criticality.
Yep.
And then, yes, we'll be dredging the ones. We've started dredging a couple already.
Okay.
I think we did 2. Did we dredge one last year?
Because I know they
think
said
we
our
did.
pond was probably second on the list,
Yeah.
and nothing's happened at our
We-
pond.
If we can, if we got your name, we
Yep.
will have the city administrator reach out to
Okay.
Public Works, just connect with them, and then get back to you on that.
Awesome.
But we do have a plan in place to start looking at all the ponds.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And just opening some of them up to the inlets and outlets is going to help some of that flow through there also, which a lot of them are were plugged and things like that. So we will reach back to you.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close public comments, and then we will move to the consent agenda. Anything on the consent agenda that needs to be pulled for further discussion? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. With that, that will take us to number 12. A legislative update from our Minnesota House Representative, Jim Nash. Welcome to Mayor City Council, Jim.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council and audience, thanks for having me in. I always enjoy coming to visit the cities that I represent in St. Paul. Some brief items I'd like to bring to your attention as to things that are moving through the process that will impact you. And then, as usual, just like to stand for questions from the council in order to maybe clarify some things or have you throw curveballs at me, which is always a good time. So we started in early January, and the majority party has effectively buried the speedometer into the floor, and things are moving rapidly. Want to talk mostly about things that will directly impact cities and a couple of different things that we're doing. You may have heard of a bill that is designed to create earned sick and safe time or paid family medical leave for people. This is going to be a broad sweeping bill that will include every possible employer. Cities are not exempt. And what it effectively means is that if an employee wishes to take some time off due to either illness of their own or illness of a family member for various reasons, that in culminated stacking that you could wind up having to provide them with up to 26 weeks off paid leave. Now, obviously, that presents some issues from a funding perspective of how do you pay somebody for that time to be away, but also have someone who comes in behind them to do some work. Because the work never stops, as you all know. And having served on city council, I know that it's always quite tight. You're always scrambling for people to come and plow roads or dredge ponds, which is always glamorous work. And the question that that we have been asking as the minority party is, what is this going to do to business people around the state? What is this going to do for the small business on Main Street, Mayer, Minnesota? What's it going to do for the city? We've tried to seek some exemptions for certain types of or certain sizes of business. The bill and the way it's currently written is it is one employee. And what we have seen and shown from cities or states around the country is that I think New York has it at 15, other places have it at 20. So that those small businesses that, as a recovering small business owner, I had maybe 10 or 12 people and I did most of everything, or my business partners did things that I didn't. I think of the small business owners that are close friends of mine, and they literally do everything. So they open the doors in the morning, they serve customers all day, they sweep up afterwards, they go upstairs to do payroll and state taxes and all that. There's no exemption of any kind for people in that particular size of business. I find that deeply troubling. We have pushed against that and fought against that in committee a number of times. I am unsure where that is going, but in reading the bill itself, it takes 3 years of payroll taxes just to get it to the point where the state can then disperse the payments to those people who are going to come out of the workforce to do the safe time with home. So that's 3 years, and it is considered a tax. So it's 3 years of that just to build up the pool in order to then begin helping people out. And what I know of folks here in my district, and as I said, I do call myself a recovering business owner after having sold my business. It's kind of like a boat. The best day that you buy a boat is only second to the day that you sell the boat. What I know from that is it's going to be incredibly cumbersome for people who own a business here in town or anywhere in Carver County or anywhere in the state for that matter. And, we understand that business owners, if they have that employee that they rely on and that they are an absolute integral part of that business, they're going to do the right thing. And this bill presupposes that they won't. So we have some concerns there. Another bill that has been moving through the committee process, and you have seen it on TV, is the legalization of recreational marijuana. And as a former mayor, I have fought it as many times as I can for a couple of different provisions. And there are people on both sides of the issue as to, do you want recreational? Do you not want recreational? And it is not partisan to that effort. But the thing that I have been fighting is this, that in the bill, it does not allow for cities to opt out of having a dispensary in your city limits. And what I have offered a number of times is, and I don't have the statute right off the top of my head, but maybe Administrator Johnson, maybe you've memorized all the municipal codes. But what it is effectively is a referenda that the city, and the best example of it is the city of, I think it was Cokato a number of years ago, passed a referendum that said that we wish to be a dry city. And I modeled the language around that to say, if a city has a referenda and the vote comes back that they do not wish to have a dispensary in your city, that cities are then given the right to do so. The majority party has removed that local control element from conversation. We've offered the amendment a number of times. And the message is effectively cities don't have a choice but to have a dispensary. And in asking clarifying questions, I said, well, what if a city in my district or somewhere else clearly doesn't want one? What happens then? And they said, well, there would not be any way for the city to either through zoning or permitting or anything to prevent that from happening. Now, again, I don't know that if you held a referendum that it would pass or fail. I don't know. But I'm trying to put tools in the toolkit for cities around our state to at least put it to the people who live here to say, how do you feel about this? Along with that, the enforcement of the laws that would come along with that will fall on, in this case, because you're like Waconia, you contract for services with the sheriff. Any problems that happen inside the city would then fall on your shoulders from an enforcement perspective, and you would eventually have to probably up your levy for things that may or may not happen. So that's a problem from where I sit, and the message around local control is really quite profound. Some other issues, we'll talk some taxation issues. Many folks in the city of Mayor and across the county send emails to me, and I'm sure they ask you as well, what's going on with the taxation on Social Security. So we have a lot of folks that may be on Social Security or they're about to. We have pushed and pushed and pushed and begged for that bill to make it to the floor. And as of yet, the majority party has not. We have brought the bill up as what's called an urgency. And what it means is we bring up the bill that is moving through the legislature, we bring it to the floor, we declare an urgency, and we say it is time to get this passed. And each time they have shut down the procedural motions because they don't want to have that conversation. What we have heard in committee and on the floor is that despite the fact that we have not been able to find any member of the majority party that campaigned on making it so that only certain members benefit from it, the message during the campaign was that we should repeal the tax. That is our position. My position in particular is when you work, you've already paid in that tax on Social Security. We're taxing it twice. We're one of 12 states across the country that does that, and I would like us to shorten the list by one and have it be us. And what we have heard from both the governor and the majority party is that they think that if you are of a economic strata that they can provide benefit for you, you should, but that for folks who might have means or have done well for themselves, that you should not have that which has already been taxed once taken off the plate. So I find that somewhat distressing. There is a bill to create a 5th tier income tax. As many of you know, we have 4 tiers here in the state of Minnesota. The new proposed tier would be, I think it's 12.5% on $225,000 of yearly income. Now, for many people, that's not something to be concerned about, but for many people who are business owners, that are pass-through business owners, or that may be farmers or whatever, that's going to drastically impact them. There is a regular study put out, and I can forward it to the administrator if you'd like to see it, that ranks the states in friendliness of conducting business there, and Minnesota is number 49th now. And a state that is usually below us on many metrics, the state of Mississippi, is actually ranked quite higher. An amusing anecdote, if you all watch Shark Tank, you know Mr. Wonderful. Mr. Wonderful actually said that he would never invest a dime in the state of Minnesota because we are unfriendly to businesses. Again, I find that somewhat disturbing. Before I stand for questions, I will point out that right now, it was released today from the Housing Committee, there is a bill or a part of that bill that would create an imposed tax of 0.25% metro-wide sales tax to provide funding to do rental assistance for people who live in the metro area. It is not a statewide imposition of this tax, but the goal of the majority party and the chair is to effectively rent apartments for anybody who's renting them and use some of this money to pay their rent. I have heard a lot about that already in just the few short hours that it has been out, but it is going to be another metro-wide sales tax. So I think one possible bright note coming out of the session is that the chair of the Transportation Committee, Representative Frank Hornstein, is working with me and a handful of others to undergo some fairly aggressive Met Council reform. And again, we're out here kind of on the terminal end of the Met Council, but we still have to do whatever it is that they tell us, even if we think that that's crazy. What we're seeing in this bill is that it would have some massive reforms. It might make it an elected position, which I'm still not sure is exactly the wisest. But there are some other reforms that would come that actually seek to break some of the things that the Met Council has under their purview out into other agencies that are realistically more accountable to both the legislature and to the citizen. Because right now, as we all know, the Met Council, our Met Council here in the state of Minnesota, in the Minneapolis area, is the only Met Council or metropolitan planning organization in the entire country that is not elected. So if you go to even cities within the state of Minnesota, you go to Duluth, you go to Rochester, their MPOs are elected. Many, many years ago, there was a carve out for the Minneapolis-St. Paul MPO, and I think it's time to change how that is done. And it really comes on the heels of what's gone on with the Southwest Metro Light Rail. And to show you just how bad things are getting, one of the most prominent DFLers pulled me aside and they said, Jim, you know, the bill that you passed in 2017 to take the state out of funding of Southwest Light Rail, we hated it at the time, but in retrospect, Jim, that was the best bill you've ever passed in your life, because it removed a little over $100 million that the state was going to appropriate to pay into that. And as we've seen, that's a black hole. It's not done. There has been a number of studies and a number of audits done by the legislative auditor showing that it is poorly executed, poorly run, poorly managed, poorly everything. Think of something and you can put poorly in front of it for that project. So that is at least something that is a little encouraging because as you all know, many of the decisions based on housing and zoning and roads and all kinds of things are dictated by the Met Council. And as you work towards your next comprehensive plan, which I'm sure you're working diligently on because everybody loves working on a comp plan, they have more insight or they have more impact over your comp plan than you do. And I always maintained when I was mayor that we know our city far better than the Met Council does. So politely leave. So with that, I'm happy to take questions and answer something that I may have tantalized you with that you want more details on.
I was just curious on that 26 weeks paid leave. Is that just for full-time employees or would that go into consideration for part-time employees too?
Council member, members of the council, thank you for that question. It gets worse. So all you have to do is effectively work 1 hour a week in order to be eligible for this.
So in return, would they get 1 hour paid
No.
for the
no,
26 weeks? So 26 hours?
No. So you have to work 1 hour a week to qualify for it, but you can get full benefit.
And is that paid by the company or because you talked about takes 3 years? Is that like the taxes are going to go back and pay the businesses or?
Yep. Council member, Mr. Mayor and council, thank you for that. It is paid by the employer and it is collected as a tax. And the program, so if it were signed into law tomorrow, 3 years forward from tomorrow is when the first benefit might be eligible to be paid out because it would take that long for the state to collect all those taxes. But it is paid by the business and it is going to be a crushing blow if it becomes reality. And school boards are one aspect that might not cross everybody's mind, but in municipal government, you're able to pass a levy at the end of every year, right? However, a school board is beholden to the state for the formulary that goes out, and every now and then they pass a referendum. They cannot pass a levy every year to react to this now outrageous cost that they're going to suffer, and they have hundreds and hundreds of employees. So that's one of the things that we have been fighting back against, and the School Board Association has been great partners with us, saying if you would like to watch schools get crushed, pass this bill, because they have no way out of it, and yet they would have to begin paying immediately, and they would have to wait 3 years for a benefit to be imparted.
And is this just businesses incorporated in the state of Minnesota or operating in the state of Minnesota?
Council member, mayors, member of the council, if you are operating a business in the state of Minnesota, you would be falling underneath this. So you couldn't incorporate in one of the Dakotas, do business here and get out of it. As long as you are conducting business, you're subject to it. That's the face that I had.
I mean, I'm probably not going to have a job.
We're not going to have any small businesses anymore.
No.
I work for a large company
What
and
more
I
we can
mean,
do to shut them down. Any other questions?
Oh,
And you touched on mainly what I want to talk a little bit about the Southwest
Sure.
Rail, and I think you kind of covered a little bit of it. I just want to see what your kind of thoughts were on the elected versus appointed kind of thing, and you kind of touched on that. So you kind of captured what I just because it's been in the news a lot lately and the expenses on that. And I mean, at some point, do you just cut the tie? We're done. I mean, the money invested already is just gone. Cut the ties now, or do you carry on with it after these audits and the things that are showing and way over budget, way over timelines?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I would bet all the money in my wallet against all the money in your wallets right now that even though it might be appealing to folks like us to say, just shut it down, that after some of the reforms that may take place, they'll make the argument that it is mostly completed, and it's about 70% completed. So they would argue to complete it all the way. But what we found last year through some studies, and it'll be a larger number this year, but I think it cost effectively $34,000 an inch to build Southwest Light Rail. Now, I'm not a math major, but that's a lot. That's a lot. And when you consider that we're just coming out of winter and it's pothole season here in the state of Minnesota, I would much rather invest a lot of money into making sure that our roads are in great shape, and bridges, and and we are working on some of those things. Not that Highway 5 is hugely impactful in the area that we're looking at, but I am working with the majority party to get some funding for Highway 5 between Victoria and the Chanhassen near the Arboretum. So I have that in a bill that's working. We are working on some of the sewer issues for the city of New Germany, and having sat in many of their consultations and conversations, I know that they're working with you and that they're sending you some presents through some pipes, or at least there's been conversation about that, and we're trying to help them out so that honestly that they can grow. We're trying to help. We're trying to be mindful and helpful of the cities, in the metro, to say there are cities, and this may come as a shock for some, there are cities that exist outside of the 494 ring.
I think New Germany is a good example of, not that mayor doesn't need help or anyone in Carver County, but
Yeah.
that's a good example with their wastewater that they
Yep.
they just can't get the infrastructure built, and they can't get the growth in there. And we have had some conversations about doing some sharing, and they kind of got more to the latest was they're going to try to see what they can do on their own first, but
Yeah, we have a bonding request in for them, and
requirements and the new phosphorus requirements, and the new stuff that's being mandated on these, it's tough to be able to meet those.
yeah. Well, I will share another metric with you. So the governor and the majority party have proposed a 5% increase on the school formula. And traditionally it's 2% and 2%. So 2% the first year of the biennium, and then it's compounded into the next 2% over the next year. They are proposing 5 and 5, which is quite a lot. However, we did the math and we realized that with many of the requirements that they have, the paid family medical leave and some of the other things, that schools will actually be going backwards, even though they're putting 5 and 5 on the formula. So they'll actually be taking a step backwards. It's disturbing. And I will tell you also that we have we'll just call it an $18 billion proposed budget surplus. In the fiscal forecast that they came out last week, they said that's likely to stay close to the same, but the majority party in their budget targets and budget agreements have spent all of what we currently have as a forecasted surplus, and they're spending another $1 billion in things that they're doing some shifts. And then there's a thing called tails, which means we operate in 2-year increments. That's called a biennium, but they're pushing much of the spending that they're doing now out into the next 2-year biennium. And that, based on what we are hearing from national economic forecasts, we may see a slowdown. We may not, but based on their tail spending alone, that is likely to create a structural deficit. So when we come in to the next legislative session after next year is over and done, we go through an election, whoever is in charge then is likely to have to figure out their way out of a deficit.
After an $18 billion surplus?
Council member, mayor, members of the council, yes. Now, to those of us here in Carver County, we think, oh, we have a budget surplus. That means first and foremost, we're over collecting. So two, we should, do something crazy like cut taxes, give money back, ridiculous things like that. That is not crossing their minds. And that's not me saying that, that's their budget priorities saying that in what they have given out as targets to the different departments and different committees. And I think I talked about the tax for housing. Well, the tax for housing is on top of the housing committee being given $1 billion to also cover some of the same things. So they're giving $1 billion to the chair of the housing committee, but they're also going to impose this new tax that will go over and above the $1 billion that they've already given in that budget.
Is that the metro-wide sales tax for rentals you were just talking about?
Councilmember, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes.
And is that, who would take that on? Then would that be the responsibility of like the cities to collect that tax and then pay that, or no?
So that would be a sales tax.
Oh, okay.
That would be collected. It would go to the state, and then it would be distributed out through the Minnesota Housing Authority. And one of the prominent parts of this legislative session is MHFA has been given, through many, many, many bills that have moved through committee, they're going to have billions of dollars that they are in charge of managing. They've already said that they don't have the staff for it. One of the more problematic things that I have been pushing since I got there is when you give that much money to an organization, they are then in turn supposed to give it out as grants, and sometimes it's done well. But I have maintained that for years, many of the grant peel-offs that they have to administer the grant are crazy exorbitant numbers. Some of them are up to 10%. So if you give them $1 billion and you take 10% off of that for grant management, you take a half a step back and you look at the reporting structure of the people who work there that are giving out the grants. Sometimes it's 2 people, sometimes it's 1 person. Now, I've run businesses, both owning them and then managing them. I manage the sales division for a $2.5 billion company. I don't need that much grant money to employ people to distribute cash. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars for a department of 2 people. I can't imagine that's going to go well long-term. So I bring nothing but good news.
Yeah, great.
It's just hard to hear $18 billion surplus and they're gonna raise sales tax to help people that can't.
And income tax.
And income tax.
But I'm told we have lots of services that we benefit from here in the state of Minnesota.
Any other questions?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as I do every time, my phone number is published to the internet, and I've done that ever since I was elected as a council member in Waconia, so I will give it for those watching. It's 952-807-6416. Again, 952-807-6416. I don't sleep a ton, so if you text or email, I actually respond to my emails. I also, this last week alone, I got 7,000 emails. It is awfully hard to keep up with it sometimes.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Thank
Yeah.
you for representing Carver County. And we appreciate everything you do and keep fighting.
I will. I would also invite you to come down sometime. As I say jokingly on the floor, and in these types of meetings, it's always nice to have some normal people come down to the Capitol because we're running really low on normal people down there.
Right.
So, thanks again.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks for your time. All right, with that, let's move to number 13, consider approval of computer use policy.
I'll need to get there.
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of 2 policies that we're looking to implement. This comes on the back of recommendations that came from the last council meeting where we need to shore up some of our cybersecurity infrastructure. We had the report from Jimmy on the physical end, and that seems to be all right. But on the policy end, we want to make sure we're shoring things up. So the first we have of 2 is the computer use policy. And this goes over a number of items. One starts with personal use. This really comes down to how you use computers on the city's network related to some personal use. And we recognize that incidental personal use does happen across networks, but it really clamps down and regulates what that can be and what it can be used for. And gives rules and regulations for how employees interact. First bullet point there, employees shall not connect personal peripheral tools or equipment to city-owned systems without prior approval from the city administrator. If connected, must follow directions for protecting the city's computer network. That's spelled out in the rest of this. Personal files should not be stored on city computer equipment. This also applies to personal media files, but not limited to MP3 files, WAV files, movie files, iTunes files, or any other file created copying a music CD, DVD, or files from the internet. IT staff will delete these files if found on the network, computers, or other city-owned equipment. Exceptions would be for recordings for which the city has created, owns, purchased, or has a license for. Last one on there is city equipment or technology shall not be used for personal business interests, for profit ventures, political activities, or other uses deemed by the city administrator to be inconsistent with city activities. Any questions should be directed to the city administrator for determination. Then we get into the hardware end of things. This talks about physical equipment, laptops, other things that what they can be used for on the city's network. City will not supply laptop computers based solely on the desire of the employees to work off-site. A laptop request will be required for each laptop deployment and must be approved by the city administrator. Laptops will only be issued to employees who travel frequently and require the use of a full computer while traveling, regularly use their laptop off-site, require a laptop for access to special software systems, and or have a documented business need for a laptop. Only city staff may use city computer equipment. Use of city equipment by family members, friends, or others is strictly prohibited. Employees are responsible for the proper use and care of city-owned computer equipment. City computer equipment must be secured while off city premises. Do not leave computer equipment in an unlocked or unattended at any off-site facility. Computer equipment should not be exposed to extreme temperature or humidity. If they are, make sure they return to normal before being turned on. For software, generally speaking, the city will provide all the software that is absolutely needed. If employees want to have any additional software, that has to be approved by the city administrator and the IT consultant. If we find any authorized software, we're allowed to remove it at any time without notice. For electronic mail, we provide the city with email addresses for work-related use. These should not be used. Some incidental personal use may be allowed. However, it should be almost strictly for work-related and consistent with city policies. Employee emails may be considered public data for both e-discovery and information requests and may not be protected by privacy laws. Email may also be monitored as directed by the city, authorized staff, and without a notice to the employee. For the email guidelines, never transmit an email that you would not want your supervisor, other employees, members, city officials, or the media to read or publish. Use caution or avoid corresponding by email on confidential communications. Do not open email attachments or links from an unknown sender. Question and verify known senders. Delete junk or spam email without opening it if possible. Do not respond to unknown senders. Any email received requesting demanding payment must be verified for authenticity. Emails from city staff, elected officials, or city consultants requesting or demanding payment must be brought to the city administrator's attention immediately to be reviewed for fraudulent spam phishing email activity. Do not use harassing language or any other remarks, including insensitive language or derogatory, offensive, or insulting comments or jokes. For electronic calendars, just make sure they are all shared and kept up to date. Instant messaging, that is prohibited outright due to data retention concerns. For personal devices, Employees may choose to use their own equipment to read or compose email or other city data as governed in this policy. Employees understand that by connecting their personal equipment to the city's email server, their personal devices could be searched during an e-discovery or other court-ordered scenarios, and agree to grant access to their personal devices should a situation arise. Well, if you got some, yeah.
If you could scroll up a little bit. to
Yep.
right there. Do not open emails, attachments, or links from an unknown sender. Should we add something in there to maybe make it a little more robust, that if you feel you did open something that you shouldn't have, notify the city administrator immediately or IT consultant or something like that? Because it can happen. I mean,
Mhm.
we can open it. We just don't want it to be, oh, okay, well, I'll try to get to it later, you know. It's a consideration. I just want to make, if you can make a note on that.
Yep.
Unlike, I don't know how the city system works, but like we use Outlook with the federal, but we can report ours right in there and it goes directly to our IT.
We don't have that
Okay.
quick reporting
I
function.
wasn't
yeah.
sure. Okay, I wasn't sure.
And thankfully, we're small enough staff to where we can get that.
Okay.
Janelle can walk around the corner and say,
It's just something to consider.
Yep.
Make it a little more robust.
or if Kyle can just give me a quick text and say, I accidentally opened this email,
Yeah.
have Jimmy look into it.
All right, thank you.
For security, regarding passwords, passwords must be at least 8 characters long and include the following: lowercase, uppercase, numeric, and non-alphanumeric character. Passwords may be changed as necessary as determined by the city administrator or IT consultants. Passwords should not be shared or told to other staff. If it is necessary to access an employee's computer when they are absent, contact your supervisor or the city administrator. The IT consultant will not provide access to staff accounts without approval of the city administrator. Passwords should not be stored in any location on or near the computer or stored electronically, such as in a cell phone or other mobile device. Employees must change passwords every 6 months when prompted or on another schedule as determined by the city administrator.
Now, did that 6-month recommendation come from our IT consultant?
That was just a date picked.
Have you run that by him to see? It seems long to me.
Jimmy did review this,
Okay.
and he had some suggestions on a couple other things, but he did not comment on the 6 months. And he did review this.
Seems 3 months would be.
In 90
In
days.
90
Yep.
days.
Yep, ours is 90.
I mean, but again, something to consider.
Or maybe consider more than 8
This is
characters.
going to come back into next meeting, right, for final approval?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure yours is 15, just like ours.
Yeah.
If Jimmy's fine with that, the number of characters, I'm okay with that. If he feels that's
I just feel like
long enough of a password, I'm certainly not qualified to make that judgment, but
I'm not either. I think it would be harder. Obviously, the more characters there are, or more difficult to figure out. Just a
Unless-
thought.
Just thinking that the multi-factor authenticator.
That's included in here as the multi-factor
Yeah.
authenticator.
and for that reason too, I'm not overly concerned with that, but 6 months seems long to me.
I will ask Jimmy about it specifically. Whenever possible, multi-factor authentication must be implemented and used for any accounts which utilize a password. Network desktops must be locked out if left unattended for 30 minutes or longer. Spelling error there. Network access, non-city-owned laptops, phones, tablets, et cetera, used in the city building should be only use the guest wireless connection to the internet. Under no circumstances should any non-owned equipment, non-city-owned equipment be connected to the city's computer network. Exceptions may be granted by the city administrator and/or IT consultant. Personal computer equipment may not be connected to the city's network without prior approval of the IT consultant. Personal equipment may be subject to password requirements or other electronic security measures as determined by the IT consultant. And on to remote access to the network. Examples include Outlook web access, webmail, VPNs, Windows Remote Desktop, and other Windows Terminal server connections. While connected to the city computer resources remotely, all aspects of the city's computer use policy will apply, including the following. Remote access to the city's network requires a request from the city administrator and approval from the IT consultant. Remote access privileges may be revoked at any time by the IT consultant or city administrator. If remote access is from a non-city-owned computer, updated antivirus software must be installed and operational on the computer equipment. And all critical operating system updates must be installed prior to connecting to the city network remotely. Failure to comply could result in the termination of remote access privileges. Recreational use of remote connections to the city's network is strictly forbidden. An example of this would be a family member utilizing the city's cellular connection to visit websites. Private or confidential data should not be transmitted over an unsecured wireless connection. Wireless connections are not secure and could pose a security risk if used to transmit city passwords or other private data while connecting to city resources. Wireless connections include those over cellular networks and wireless access points, regardless of the technology used to connect. For the internet itself, information found on the internet and used for city work must be verified, be accurate and factually correct. Reasonable personal use of the internet is permitted. Employees may not at any time access inappropriate sites. Some examples of inappropriate sites include, but are not limited to, adult entertainment, sexually explicit material, or material advocating intolerance of other people, races, or religions. If you are unsure whether a site may be may include inappropriate information, you should not visit it. If an employee's use of the internet is compromising the integrity of the city's network, the IT consultant may temporarily restrict the employee's access to the internet. If the IT consultant does not restrict access, they will notify the employee and the city administrator as soon as possible and work with the employee to rectify the situation.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So in that bullet, I thought Jimmy wasn't monitoring anything. So,
It's more if we catch it happening
okay.
type of thing. If we suspect it, then we can start taking a look. So there's not active monitoring, but if we believe there is something we should take a look at,
Okay.
we can spot look in
Okay.
on it.
Isn't there software or something that can send an alert to Jimmy? If something like that happens, there's gotta be something that's got a flag.
Well, there's certain websites that I can't access.
Well, it's the same here.
Right. Like, I mean,
You
I can't even look
check
up
personal email.
I can't even look up a Powerball number because that's considered gambling.
Right.
Like, so I would think there are some restrictions that,
Well, and that's fine, but I don't know. It should be like a red flag that, you know,
But again, remember, Jimmy's a time and materials.
and I understand that. I understand that. I just, you know, you would just really think that there's something out there that would.
that's why my question was asked, right? Because he's more of a time and material. So
Mhm.
how are we going to catch it was more of my question, but
When it's suspected.
Okay.
Type of thing. Not necessarily proactive all the time monitoring. I'm getting logs of every website everybody visits, but reactive in if we're seeing behavior or seeing things.
So realistically, though, I mean, it could at that point be too late already.
For inappropriate sites.
Oh, yeah, but I'm talking in general for, you know, because I'm assuming our monitoring is still gonna be the same for if somebody's logged in, so on and so forth, you know, more reactive than proactive. I'm just saying the damage still could be done, right?
If an employee willfully breaks this policy. Right. Right now, it's also to remember, the city has no policy.
Right. And I get that. And I get mistakes happen and all that stuff. I just,
But this is the process, like
right,
Christian Torkelson talked about, is we're building.
right.
Rome's not going to be built in a day.
Exactly. I agree.
We're getting there with this, and then we'll have the training component and then other policies that the security maturity assessment will be recommending. If we need to go to a level of service with a different IT company because Jimmy simply does not provide it as a time and materials person, that would then come out, that would then satisfy the proactive approach
Right.
rather than where we're at now.
It's so hard to say, having had this just happen to us, you don't want to see it happen again. It probably never will happen again. But you also want to go spending tens of thousands of dollars on the proactive side either of things. Well, like he was saying, like upgrading potentially from Jimmy to a more proactive monitoring. You don't want to go completely off the deep end, one direction either, and spend all this money.
Incoming.
Right,
That's
right.
not Employees.
Right.
That's income. So is that something that can be monitored?
That's something, it's part of the process, that security maturity assessment
Right.
that Christian talked about.
Small steps, yep.
Yeah, like Christian said, it takes time to build up to it.
Yep.
But this is starting this process.
I understand.
Where did I leave off?
Sorry.
Data retention.
Data retention. So this covers relation to electronic data retention, stored and transferring files. If you're unsure whether an email or other file is a government record for purposes of records retention laws or whether it is considered protected or private, check with the city administrator. If you are unsure how to create an appropriate file structure for saving and storing electronic information, contact the city administrator. I think we've got a pretty good one in place, actually. Employees must adhere to these guidelines when transferring or storing electronic files. All electronic files must be stored on identified network drives and folder locations. The city will not back up documents stored on local computer hard drives and holds no responsibility for recovery of documents on local computer hard drives should they fail. Files may be temporarily stored on a laptop hard drive when an employee is traveling and off-site. However, the files should be copied to the network as soon as possible. Electronic files, including emails and business-related materials created on an employee's home or personal computer for a city business, must be transferred to and stored in designated locations on the city's network. City-related files should not be stored on an employee's personal computer unless otherwise defined in this policy. All removable storage media must be verified to be virus-free before connecting to the city equipment. Email that constitutes an official record of the city business must be kept in accordance with all records retention requirements for the department and should be copied on to the network for storage. Email that is simple correspondence and not official record of city business should be deleted as soon as possible and should not be retained by employees for more than 3 months. The city will not retain emails longer than 1 year on the network or in network backups. Electronic files or emails that may be classified as protected or private information should be stored in a location on the city's network that is properly secured. Any files considered private or confidential should not be stored anywhere other than the city's network. If there is a need to take confidential information off-site, it must be stored on encrypted media. The IT consultant can assist in the creation of such media. And that constitutes the policy. Any other edits to this that anyone saw? I got a couple here I have to throw together.
There are quite a few references to can or can't do certain things without the city administrator's approval. Do you have a plan to document that, or how or are you gonna just how's that gonna be handled, I guess, or what are your thoughts, or have you put thought into that yet? I'm just looking at maybe an instance, say this administrator leaves, new one comes on, finds something that's against policy and, oh no, last administrator gave me permission to do that. It was okay. Would we know that? Do we have to know that? protect some of that sides of things. So if you were gone, then an employee just couldn't, if the city administrator left, new one came in, they just can't say, oh, no, I had full access from the city administrator. He had given it to me and I hadn't heard different, so I continued doing whatever I want. You see a need for it or not? And I don't need an answer today, but maybe that's something to ponder.
I don't think there's going to be that many exceptions that you really need to
Okay.
document them.
All right.
I think as long as it's verbal.
And I think you're right, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Most of the stuff also the IT consultant would be aware of too.
Yep.
So there would be dual knowledge on that front. And then the next item on, any other questions on the computer use policy?
I kind of had one where it mentioned keeping it for only a year, emails. About all going back when you have to search back.
It's, you don't keep them that long. It's all data records retention.
Through our transitions, I'm really glad that I had access to years back.
Right.
So, you know,
The recommendation from the league is not to carry them that long.
Well, I mean, I think that brings up a good point. I'll have to think a little bit.
You
on
should
that.
be saving it somewhere else. So if it's not saved in your inbox or in your email, will there be training for staff on the appropriate record retention so that it is saved on a network file?
That's where training on the policy does come in.
So just so I understand it, emails will be deleted automatically delete after 1 year.
Yes.
Off the main network.
Unless they're saved some.
Unless they have to be saved according to record retention policy, or if they're just strictly correspondence related emails, those just get deleted outright.
Would that, okay.
But if it's-
Again, I'm not an IT person, so I don't know a lot about this, obviously, but I just want to make sure we're not shooting ourselves in the foot. And I'm thinking back to the last year where we had 3 city administrators, and it was good to be able to go back and look at things to get caught. Could that negatively impact us if we're in those kind of situations?
There was nothing in the emails that I couldn't have figured out a different way.
Okay,
It was convenient, but it wasn't show-stopping
okay,
in that regard.
perfect.
No concern on like verbal communication with contractors or anything that maybe go back on their word and you don't have that?
All of that would, well, if you're doing it right, that's in contract, spelling out exactly what's supposed to be done, especially on major projects.
Right.
And with the major projects, you have the architect or engineer involved, and you keep them in the loop on all decisions, so all parties are aware what's been agreed to. And if there's major changes to a project, you would likely have a change order that's associated with it. Change orders need to be approved by city council.
And the concern with keeping them longer than that is that if for some reason an email gets compromised again, whoever compromised it can only go back, they can't go back and get. Is that the
Yeah.
intent of it?
Yeah, and then it's from a data retention standpoint is keeping all of those records. The more emails you have, the more it costs to keep all of those records, those emails for others. So regularly cleaning them out keeps that down.
And that makes some sense to me. I mean,
And anything,
get that.
if anything major happens, there will be a document that a resolution, a motion by the city council, and the documentation will be in there that way of what
That's true.
officially happens.
Okay. I was just thinking through it on the mitigation side to make sure this same issue cannot happen. And it seems we've hit the big thing, get some policies in place, the authentication we've added, and those are the big things that are really gonna mitigate this issue versus having some else that are maybe they're 2 years versus a year. That seems pretty minor. If they're that far into it, all our other 5 steps had failed somewhere.
Yep.
I'm guessing. Okay. Just, okay. I'm good for now. And has our attorney taken a look at that? at the policy, put eyes on it all?
Nope, it's based off the league template, so league attorneys have reviewed it.
And no intention of doing that, correct?
No,
All right, thank you.
league templates are usually pretty bulletproof. Then next on the agenda after that, it's the safe electronic transfers and payments policy. So the computer use and the safe electronic transfers and payments policies were two of the immediate policies that were recommended by the league that we take a look at and look at implementing. So for this policy, purposes of this policy to establish procedures to prevent fraudulent payments or transfers to employees, vendors, and contractors. The scope of this policy applies to all city departments and employees that have control over disbursement transactions and governs the actions of all city employees. A little bit of background, cities are becoming more transparent with information on the internet, and electronic banking is becoming widely accepted. Effective internal controls policies and procedures need to be adopted to protect city funds from fraudulently being dispersed. Fraudsters are using techniques like social engineering tactics, such as impersonation and manipulation, to deceive employees with legitimate-looking correspondence or phone calls to obtain personal information, such as bank accounts or address changes that will redirect payments intended for an employee or vendor. Often, a fraudster will follow city news to learn of newly contracted vendors and use the information and proper timing to contact the city as the vendor imposter and request the first down payment. City should avoid listing dollar percentage down payment details in the city council public meeting information. Commonly used software allows fraudsters to copy and create legitimate looking vendor invoices that include slight changes to the name and address. Processes to prevent fraud. Employee portals and city intranet should utilize multi-factor authentication when available. Following are the processes to prevent the fraudulent disbursement of public funds. For the accounts payable, vendor payment approvals limited to $50,000 per transaction when initiated by city staff. This aligns with the city's insurance policy on coverage limits for fraudulent activities. All employees must follow all procedures in this policy. Over $50,000 may not be initiated or processed until express authorization is granted by action of the city council, and they must follow all procedures in this policy. C, require at least 2 approvals within the city. One must be the city administrator for all disbursements of funds to verify accuracy of destination. Number 2, sorry, did you have something?
If you can scroll up a little bit. So right there on the process to prevent fraud, the first sentence there about multi-factor authentication, when available, when wouldn't it be available?
I'm not sure. It just reinforces that we want multi-factor used whenever possible.
Would it be worth just taking out when available? That it must utilize multi-factor authentication?
No, I think that language is fine. If we ever run into a situation where it's not available for some reason, if you don't leave it out and we're not allowed to, then you're just not allowed to use it at all.
Might not be a bad thing. Okay.
Number 2, update and review vendor files annually. Review and correct duplicate vendors in system with minor differences, i.e. LEC or incorporated. Annually review list of vendors and close or inactivate vendors not currently used by the city. Review for unusual activity such as fluctuation in payment amounts, activity for closed vendors, etc. Compare vendor information such as phone numbers, address, and bank account information to employee records for other than employee expense reimbursements. Develop vendor change form for critical information such as electronic banking information, addresses, or billing practices. These forms should not be provided online, but requested from accounts payable and mailed to trusted information on file. Receive verbal communication using trusted information on file regarding all changes on critical information. Always perform a validation transfer or test deposit with a blind confirmation for all new vendors or, or vendors requesting a change in electronic banking information. Do not provide copies of contracts within council packets that are posted on the city website unless payment terms are hidden. Do not provide copies of vendor invoices within council packets that are posted on the city website. These two, they kind of run contradictory to what cities have historically done in the past and tried to be very transparent about the payments and terms that are brought to the public. But what they're finding is that's now being used against us by fraudsters. So when it's posted on the city's website, that vendor information is not going to be available, but it will be in the city council packets to you guys. So you can see those full things, but it just won't be on the public side. So somebody can't grab it off the internet using our website and try to manipulate something within that.
Yeah, I struggle with those too, just like you said, from a transparency standpoint.
I agree, but they're being weaponized against cities. Unfortunately, it's taking advantage of something that we hold dear, which is transparency, and now it's using it against us because we want the public to know what we're spending our money on. It's the public's money. But in situations like this, it's becoming more and more prevalent. Always require a signed a signed Form W-9 from every new payee in advance of making any payments or change in a mailing address. This can be confirmed online or directly with the IRS. Require wire transfer to have dual approvals, electronic or verbal authentication with the banking institution.
So I'm sorry, I'm just going back to that again. So how will we post? So council will get their packet with the invoices in them or contracts, whichever.
Yes.
Then posting on the internet, you'll just remove those, you'll make a second.
Yes.
Redacted.
So there'll be two packets that go, one's the public facing one and one's that the city council gets. And you still, within the structure of how our republic works is that citizens elect you guys to the city council to serve as representatives in making the public choices. That still serves as the balancing mechanism in this to make sure that things are reviewed properly before they're approved. Now, it just won't be out there for the world to see, and somebody from another part of the world to take advantage of that to try to fleece a city out of a payment by impersonating a vendor or taking terms and contract and sliding in that way.
But would be available to a citizen upon request?
Yes, so good point, very good point on that. Is there also public data requests? So if a citizen wanted to get the vendor transactions, they could certainly ask us up at City Hall and we would happily provide that.
Could we put that, if anything gets removed out of the packet, could we put something in it that says this invoice or this page has been removed per our policy? If you would like to view it, come to City Hall and you can view. Could we put something in there letting people know that it's been out there so they know? I really want,
So that's always been true. So prior to this, if, let's say it wasn't posted in the packet for some reason, a citizen could have done a data request. And they know that these exist because the agenda item is still in there. Claims for payment is still in there. The contract is still in there.
it's assuming everyone knows how it all works. All right, well, that's something we can improve. We
Yep.
can take a look at later, but.
Trying to
Yeah, we
strike
wanna
that
struggle
balancing
with that
act.
part of it, right? That's
Right.
but
I agree.
see why to not have some of that now in the world we're living in, but
Yeah, and I always go back to, I didn't write this. This is the League of Minnesota Cities that drafted this.
yeah.
They represent nearly all cities in Minnesota. They're the go-to organization for cities.
Right.
No, and I understand that, but that's why they're written for Bloomington versus Mayor also, which are obviously two different municipalities, right? They gotta
Right?
try to do a big umbrella, so
But in both cases, that can be weaponized against the city.
understood, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Then on the payroll side of thing, receive both written and verbal communication from the employee confirming any requested changes to direct deposit banking information. Develop employee change forms for critical information such as direct deposit banking information. These forms should not be provided online, but requested from Finance Human Resources or kept on a secure employee intranet. All payroll and records containing data covered by Minnesota Government Data Practices Act must be stored and transmitted securely. And then review and maintenance of the policy. The administration department is responsible for maintaining and reviewing this policy. This is the direct deposit enrollment change form, draft of it. Again, we want to have this in physical form. We don't want to receive it by email because we've had emails where so-and-so requests, here's my new direct deposit information. Please deposit my next payroll into that. Obviously, it's a fraud, but you get those email schemes. So you take that out of the equation by all employees have to fill in this form personally. So you're taking the electronic part out of it. That way, if you ever get anything via email that says, hey, I'd like to change my information, you know it's false right off the bat because you can only do it in person. So we got a form drafted up for that. And then forms for banking, financial institution account information, just so that can be verified. And then any new requests or changes to account information will be verified verbally and take at least one full pay period to become active. You must immediately notify the city if you make any changes or cancel any of your accounts. You must be the owner of the accounts to authorize direct deposit. For your security, this form will be the only accepted via hand or mail delivery. Any questions should be directed to city administration on this. And then just a standard vendor ACH authorization form. These forms were drafted up by the league as well. And this is the sign-off statement for vendors. Any other questions on that policy?
Those forms, are you sending those to the vendors and having them fill it out, or you're having the verbal conversation on the phone and filling these out yourselves?
We would send them to them to fill them out. We want them mailed back. Just because if send them via email, they could get picked up and then altered.
But then you'll still call them.
Yes, to get verbal confirmation.
Yeah.
Dual.
Make sure it's accurate.
What's your vision for training on these? Obviously, they get implemented, you'll go through and train all employees.
Yep, we'll have a staff meeting, go over.
All right. Will there be an
Line by
annual
line.
training?
Sorry, say that again?
Will there be an annual training after that as a refresher?
Yeah. We'll make sure this is kept up to speed. And then if any changes come to this in the future, we'll make sure staff are pulled together, let them know exactly what the changes are and go through those.
Maybe it might help somewhere on there to put a revision or something so we know what they're on and what they've been trained to. Might be worthwhile doing. But
We'll keep training record of that too. Similar to how we keep training records for safety training and what have you.
All right, any other questions, comments? And you don't need action on any of these two items, correct?
Nope.
They'll be coming back at future. Okay.
Yep. I just wanted to get them in front of council right away. So we got time to make changes and then adopt them.
All right, thank you. And then we can go to 15, informational update on external fraud incident.
So a bit of an update on that. The Carver County Sheriff's Office continues to work on our case, but does not have any new updates which they are able to share. Depending on how the investigation goes, it could take several months up to a couple years to complete. One of the resources we had talked to was Cottage Grove, and a couple of years ago, they had a similar incident, and they're still waiting to get finalization of it. So depending, it could take a while.
Has our investigator reached out to that community?
Yes, they have. He's reached out to the detective that helped with that and had some success, and they're working together. Christian Torkelson from the league is working with Jimmy Brand, our IT consultant, on the first steps of the security maturity assessment. Those first steps involve Christian assessing the physical IT network through a comprehensive questionnaire he and Jimmy will be working on. Once that is completed, Christian will be able to provide us with a report on the findings and recommended next steps. We just looked at the two policies here. These will go a long way to help reinforce our internal procedures against future attempts as well as other risks. Brenda Levitt at Abdo is putting together a proposal for the administrative review discussed at the last council meeting. The scope of the review includes looking at what policies we have and do not have, recommending updates or new implementations, as well as reviewing our internal controls financial procedures to ensure they're up to best practices. We're still working on obtaining a quote for additional insurance coverage for fraud. That'd be an outside amount. Talk to the league and they would not increase the limit that we have, so it'd be external on that. And then Jimmy and I this morning implemented Jimmy implemented it, but I authorized new firewall policies blocking all non-US and Canada traffic on our network. So anything non-US or Canada, it can't be outbound or it can't be inbound on our network. If people outside those two countries really need to get a hold of this, then give us a phone call. But that should also help cut down on a lot of the attempts that are made against our network by just IP range banning those countries outright, because then it's not even considered. It's just rejected outright. That's what I have for the update.
Any questions on the update? And will they be able to start giving some timelines, like from the league with Christian on some timelines on when he thinks he'll start getting some things to us?
Yeah, I can get those from Christian. I just know him and Jimmy needed to connect, and Christian needed to get the questionnaire to Jimmy, and Jimmy's got to sit down and fill it out.
Just want to be sure we're continuing to move swift as we are, so maybe a timeline from him would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. So with that, we will move to 16, consider action of resolution 2023-15, submitting a grant application to the DNR for the outdoor rec grant program.
So I received review from the DNR. We had to make some adjustments to some of the expenses on there. We had to add a handful of connections, and I'll show this on one of the future ones. So right here, this is Old Schoolhouse Park, the project area. A bit more in closer detail. Before, we had it included with City Hall in this and this ball field on the southeast side, but those have been cut out at the DNR's recommendations that don't include municipal buildings, even though the parcel runs over into it. We just want to make sure we carve out these areas because those will be deeded and they have to remain park property in perpetuity if we get the grant money. The only way you could change that is because they're with lock-on dollars. There is a mechanism where if you say, take out 3 acres of parkland, turn it into something else, you would have to create 3 acres of parkland somewhere else within the city to offset it. There is that, but it's kind of a last resort. So we're making sure we nail down the area we want to be in the deeded provisions. When we get there, and we left out this ball field area because talks had been in the future potentially pairing with Zion Lutheran on maybe a shared parking lot sometime in the future. So if that were to be locked down within the grant, it would have to be used for recreational purposes and could never be a parking lot in the future. Right. So we want to make sure we safeguard it on that. So this shows the existing facilities we have. We've got the pavilion right there that'll get fixed up here. And then the new splash pad going into the north of that. We have some, you can see some extra pathways here that lead to the ball fields, that lead to the dugouts. Those are required by ADA requirements of the grant, going to the warming house and then going down through the playground and then up a separate pathway that goes up and connects to the splash pad itself. So when we look at the grant recreation worksheet, we have the full costs there totaled. So we had to add in the ADA connections part, which Bolton Mink got back to me another $20,350 for those extra added pathways. Grant would pay for half of those. So we've got the updated figures for the DNR outdoor rec grant for $302,400 $47. The park fund would continue to contribute the same amount as we discussed at the workshop, the $164,807. And then the capital projects fund is a little bit more than it was the last time, given the increased cost at the $137,640.
Do you have what it was last time?
It only changed by the 20,000, right? So
Only the
10
20,000.
The
10
20,000?
grand, right? Half of the 20,
Yes.
Right. Okay.
because none of the other numbers changed. Is that correct?
There was one in there for a shade structure, but to make sure things were, because that was budgeted for, I think it was 14,000 for a shade structure on the splash pad site. I pulled that out since we had the 20,000 coming in for the ADA access ways. I was trying to keep things balanced.
Right, we can always add that.
All right, any other questions on the grant application?
So the grant needs to be, if the city council wishes to submit for the grant, we would need to have this in by the end of the month, the 31st. So that's why we have the resolution up here for consideration.
For a motion, if someone would like to make one.
I'll make a motion to approve the submitting of the grant application to the DNR for the outdoor recreation program.
And approving resolution 2023-15.
Yes.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion?
So Chad, just so you know, I pulled up the project cost that we reviewed last was $598,543. So we're at 604. So it's like $6,000, $7,000 roughly.
And then we're completely ADA compliant as well. So
Mhm. And the difference of those two is if you look at the last one, there was a shade structure, but there wasn't the ADA connections. And in this one, we had to add in those ADA connections because that was the review from the grant coordinator. So to try to balance that, took out the shade structure.
Yeah, I don't have the details right here. It was just a summary in a memorandum with a dollar amount.
Yep.
But, so yeah, so not quite the 10 grand to split the 20 for,
Mhm.
And just to reiterate, if we do get this grant, we will be moving forward with the project.
Right. We have to move forward.
All right. Any other discussion?
and, go ahead.
So on the the pavilion, that's not going to affect the build of the splash pad from what I.
we have 2 years to build.
We have 2 years to build, however, we would be locking in the contract for
Right.
build. It would likely start later this year. Now, in talking with the designers of the splash pad, they said they're very flexible with the pavilion. Really, what they need with the pavilion is they need the equipment room. And they even said, we can have, because the equipment will go in the equipment room, obviously, the pumps, the filters, what have you. They said, if the equipment room's not quite ready, we can always store that in another city building until it is ready, and then they would come back and install it.
Well, that should be the first part of the structure that gets completed, I would sure think.
Yeah, I guess my question is,
And they
making
said-
sure that the timeline will
Right.
match up and we're
Yeah.
not.
Yep, Jeff was very confident that they could be flexible. Like I said, if it goes into even the winter months for the reconstruction, as long as the equipment room gets a roof over it, they could come in the winter and install the equipment. It just wouldn't be up and running until the next season. They said they were very flexible.
And when does the DNR make a decision on the grant?
Usually you hear around June-ish, depending on how many apps they get and how, if I know they're one person down, so it's just one grant coordinator doing it. So depending on how many grants they get versus the workload and all of that, June, July at the latest, we would know. And if we don't get it, then we're not obligated. Oh, we can't even do the project because we need the other half to do it.
Right.
And we just resubmit the next year.
And like we discussed last meeting, and I don't think my position has changed. I just don't think we should be applying for this now. I think we should be taking a year off on this, regrouping, making sure we know where we're at after the fraud that happened. I'm not comfortable at all moving forward with this right now. If we get this grant, and I understand it's a 50-50, I completely understand if we wait a year, prices are going to go up, but we're at a point I think we need to get our arms wrapped around this more than taking on projects that aren't already in process. I still feel that way. We haven't even gotten our audit completed from 2022. What if something's wrong on those? You know, we've had 3 administrators over 2022. There could be some errors in there. I'm concerned with it. I'm certainly voting against it moving forward. I just think we have to take some time to make sure we're set, is my opinion. Any other discussion?
And this has to be submitted by the 31st of March, correct?
Correct.
So
Just not comfortable pushing it through right now with everything going on, and concerned with our audits not completed from last year.
I think you gotta, yeah, I think the stances too, is you gotta think of potentially bringing more people into the community, more community involvement. I know this has been talked about a lot since I've moved into the community a while back, several years, maybe even a decade now. So
I'm not opposed to doing the project. I just don't think we should be doing it right now. We need to make sure we can get our roads fixed and we can get our snow plowed and make sure we can get some of the needs versus our wants. But I understand what you're saying of bringing
Yeah.
people in the community, and that's important. But delaying it a year, along with the pavilion, even came in higher than what we expected, or what Park Board expected. We paid a lot more for that. All those things, I'm not comfortable with it.
So, Mayor, if there had not been a fraud instance, would you have been comfortable moving forward with this?
I was still on the fence with that just because of the pavilion came in higher than what we had hoped by a couple $100,000 from what I was hoping it would come in. So I was on the fence with that as it was. Now with the fraud incident, now with the fire of the pavilion and changes there, I know which side of the fence I'm on. Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries 3-1. All right, with that, we will move to council reports. Councilmember Wagner, anything to report on?
I have nothing.
Councilmember Ely,
nothing.
Councilmember Halt.
nope, not at this time.
And I've had numerous meetings since our last one, mainly Personnel Committee. We went through interviewing process for the 2 open positions. We're in the middle of doing some background checks, and we'll come with a recommendation next city council meeting. We had some really great candidates. We had 11 or 12 for each position. Is that about right? 13? 13 for each. 13 for each. So a lot of great candidates, and we think we have a good recommendation for next meeting. So with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. All right. Does anyone need a minute before we jump into the workshop?
Go for it.
All right, we'll open up the workshop meeting and we'll call it to order, and we'll start with the number 2, amending fire department policy. Thank you all for coming.
So for the fire department policy, bringing that back for a look, the personnel committee along with fire department representative got together and went over the recommendations for this. So a lot of the policy did not change. What did change here is 25% at all calls to receive full paracredit. That was just a clarification on that. We had talked about the stratification about it, and this was what the group thought would be the best fit. So attendance below 25% shall be prorated as follows for para-accrual credit. 20 to 24.99%, you get 9 out of 12 months credit. 15 to 19.99%, 6 out of 12. 10 to 14.99, 3, and then anything below 10%, you don't get any credit for.
confirm, was everyone in attendance? Were you at the meeting when Chief Metzel explained this? Everyone's.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to make sure someone didn't miss it and needed some more background.
Oh, I wasn't at the meeting, but I watched it
Got the
and
background. Okay. No,
understand.
perfect.
Yep.
So this was the recommendation that came up from the Personnel Committee and the Fire Department as far as accruals for that, what that would be. And then we get down to the creation of the new one. Originally, we thought college student, but the conversation broadened out to what other potential people might fall under such a, and what we came up with was seasonal type of arrangement. So the requirements, duties, training, and benefits, these are all directly copied straight from the firefighter category. So it's copy and paste with some minor changes as far as firefighter seasonal goes, but the rest of them all stay the same. As far as what is required to be a firefighter seasonal category, it's the same as a firefighter. The changes then come in number 5 under the special rules. A, the percentage requirements as listed in this policy only apply during the months in which the seasonal firefighter is present. For example, a college student would only qualify during the summer months when they are not away at college. Similarly, someone who flies south for the winter would only qualify for the months when they are in town. So that just gives a scope of what the seasonality means and the types of circumstances in which it's meant to cover. When it comes to the credit accrual for the year, would be calculated as follows. Attendance percentages for the active months multiplied by the percent of months active. Fractions shall be rounded down if below 0.5 and up for 0.5 and above. For example, a firefighter is active for 7 months in town and spends 5 months down south for the winter. During the time they are in town, their call percentage is 23%. Their work detail, fundraiser, open house percentage is over 50, and their general media attendance is also over 75. So based on the above tiered system at 23%, you get 9 to 12 months credit. You still have over 50 in the detail fundraiser. That gives you full accrual because that's not bifurcated out, or that's not tiered out. And over the 75% general attendance, that's full accrual because that's not tiered out. So 7 out of 12 months of availability is 58.33% of the year. That's just 7 divided by 12. And then 9 months credit. So you take 9 multiplied by 58 because you only got 9 out of the 12 credits because of your 23%. So you multiply that by the amount of months that you were available, 58.33%, which equals 5.25. So then you would round that and you'd get 5 of 12 months of accrual. So you're getting a prorated amount based upon your call attendance is essentially what it is.
Right.
It works down to. And those were the two changes that were recommended up from the Personnel Committee.
So my only comment is, right, like, and I take somebody who goes south and they're not here for 5 months. Is there anything they have to do before they can go out on that first call?
As long as they're up to date on their trainings and everything, they're good to go. But if they're not updated on their trainings, wouldn't allow them to go.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to if they're not up to date.
And so, like, does
We had monthly.
chief, I mean,
We have training captains who keep track of all the training.
okay,
We have training captains who do that.
Yeah, but to her point though, if they're down south, how are they gonna do their training?
They would talk with,
Switched online now. Since COVID, they can do a lot of their training online. Now, they might have to, I don't know how often they do CPR training or whatever it may be, but they'll have to figure that out. The training officers will be able to manage through that.
yeah, they're gonna have to work with the training officers to
Yep.
make sure they either get it out of the way before they leave.
But then they should also, I'm sorry, but if they're gonna take time out of their time down south, they should also get training credit then, right? If they're taking training via Zoom, correct? To count towards this?
Then we get into administrative nightmare mode.
Well, no, but I mean, that's only fair. I mean,
Right, but then we also talk about circumstances like what if you have a college student that comes back for a couple weekends during the year? Do you count that? And
yeah, then there,
That's how we
yeah.
purposely kept it months and.
the rabbit hole goes very quick.
With this being such
Yeah,
a, with
I
this
can
being
see what
such a
you're
big
saying.
improvement, to be able to get the para for
Well,
being
yeah,
gone
at least
on
they're
that,
getting
they're
credit,
getting all
period.
this advantage up there. I can't imagine anyone would even, And again, once we get this in place, maybe we have to tweak it if we get into this. We were just trying to think ahead. No one's even done this yet.
Right.
So we weren't out solving things that aren't even there yet, but
Right.
we
And
could
that's
relook at it if it became an issue. But no one's spending 20 hours a week training every week when they're gone either.
No.
Some of that they just may have to do.
And that's exactly what we brought up is this is now the first shift into something like this. If we see other issues that arise, we can, this is an editable document. We can
Right.
bring it back up once again and say, we're having issues with this. Let's make a change.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to ask.
Oh, good. All right, anything else on that?
That is the changes for the fire department policy.
Perfect. All right.
Was there talk of prorating that or no? Going back? Wasn't there, didn't we discuss?
Oh, retroactivity.
Yes.
The group discussed that and they decided not to do retroactive. Not to recommend retroactive. Just implement it for 2023 and it applies for 2023 onward. And then on the for the golf cart ordinance, the one change I had here was on the insurance requirements end of things. So I plugged that in. And then one conversation that I wanted to have with council on this is, forgot to include it, but, and other ordinances that I was reading on, the other golf cart ordinances, you typically saw a seasonal restriction and a time restriction for use. So, for example, you would restrict it. Typically, you'd see April to November, April to October. That's when you could use it. And then you could only use it sunrise to sunset.
I thought we had that in our preliminary. Didn't you?
That was regarding equipment. I know what you're saying.
I thought I heard it, or read it when we went through it the first time.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Now I gotta find it.
I thought I just saw something.
Alternate, no, that's not it.
Let's do this.
I can tell you as Nick's looking for that, I'm fine with the,
Okay, it was for different, okay, sorry, my fault.
Yeah.
I'm fine with the sunset to sunrise.
Yeah, just like the other
As
vehicles.
far as any time during the,
Sunrise to sunset.
yes.
Okay.
I say sunset to sunrise,
Sunrise.
other way around.
Woo!
Let's go sunrise to sunset.
Golf cart sober cab.
8 o'clock. Yeah.
That might not be a bad idea.
That might not be a bad gig.
You park outside the bar, need to ride home?
Yes, thank you. But as far as months, I don't see an issue with 12 months a year. If someone wants to take their cart out in the salt and have it, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I don't see what the downfall, that doesn't matter to me, but I
They're
don't
not
see
like-
the downfall to
It's
the
not
community.
enclosed.
But they're not like, they can't just roar down the street.
I mean, I don't
Unless
see
you
the I
modify
don't see
them.
the downside to the community or to the city or why it would matter.
Right.
So I don't have a preference.
The only argument I can think of on that front is if you get snowdrifts like we had in the boulevards, it becomes much harder to see a golf cart than a full vehicle.
Yeah, I guess I could see that.
That's what I could see. And I don't know if that's justification then to throw it in there, but
Most golf carts are very bright colored nowadays. They are not white.
And I can go either way. Again, we can
It
adjust
don't
it.
matter.
Did we get any input from any of the people who signed the
Can't ever,
uh, petition? Thank you. Or from the person who first brought it up? Did they have input?
nope, didn't get input.
All right. Well, then maybe we just go
go with
No,
it.
I-
sunrise to sunset
Sunrise,
for those months.
sunset, and
And for now, and if they want to come back, and I don't have one, so I don't know. I don't see the downfall to it, but again, it's a start. We can always update it.
So this will be effective then this year. Golf carts will be permitted.
sorry, what was that?
I think I'm open to anything, but I think we just start with the 6 months. Yep, the limited.
Right.
And if we get some
Always the- go ahead.
feedback, we can always change it.
What about the 6 months?
Or the April that they can only use them April. What months were you suggesting?
Like April to November?
Yeah. Yep.
Like that's not in
I
there.
think it should be like June to November.
I-
That's
Or
when
if
the
you,
snow's
or
gonna
if
be
you just want to
gone.
leave
Or
it year round,
December.
because you guys were just talking,
November's good.
they can use it year round, it just sunrise to sunset is the only restriction.
I like year round. I mean,
I'm fine with year round. I'm
I
not.
don't know why.
opposed to
I don't
it.
know why we're limiting them on snow. I don't know. I
I
guess.
don't see the downfall, but I don't know
Yeah.
enough about, I don't.
Neither.
Half of
And I
them
guess
are
if we have
jacked
no
up with
snow and
big
it's
mud
40 degrees in
tires on
December,
them.
why not? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
a homeowner wants to.
There's been plenty of.
Or like
times.
right now, I mean, the streets are pretty clear.
Yeah, I would go with all year round.
If we run into issues, we can
Run
certainly.
the issues the other way, we can tighten it up if need be. But I think that's a good point. There's been times where the snow is gone by February and we don't get snow even until January, so,
Just be a little brisk.
yeah, but
Yeah, but you
more
see
fire
motorcycles in December.
Oh, good.
I mean,
We saw one this weekend in Red Wing,
yeah.
and I'm like, and the convertible was out driving around.
all right. Are we good with that, Janelle? Do you have what you need?
That's all I've got.
All right. With that, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Get all that done?
Yes, I did. Sundown to sun up.